Hey folks, a couple years ago I made a video about the Tesla Model 3 battery and some of the technical details about that. And I figured I'm overdue for doing a similar video about the Rivian's battery now that I've had one for a couple of years and now that we know a little bit more about it. In that old video, I kind of talked about Tesla's innovation with not just the Model 3 but the Model S and the difference between an 18650 and a 2170 battery and how that helps for energy density. And again, just to compare, AA, 18650, 2170, difference in size between these batteries. Of course, this is just alkaline. But just like the Model 3, the Rivian uses a 2170 cylindrical cell, and they use a lot more of them, obviously, for a truck. They've got a lot more space and can handle a lot more weight. So in this video, I'm talking about the first generation R1 battery pack, which is for the most part a large pack. And I'll have a little bit more at the end about the second generation pack, as we know a few details about that right now, but those are just starting to go into production and come out. So when Rivian was first setting out to develop the R1, they had established themselves as a brand new company. They had to come out with this pretty complicated truck. I mean, this vehicle is something where they checked every single box with every option, every piece of technology. And it, takes decades to develop a car brand and a car company and a platform. So Rivian did, I think, what it was a smart method and went off the shelf for as many components as it possibly could. You notice a lot of the components, physical and mechanical components around the vehicle are off the shelf. And while you lose a little bit in packaging size, which is important for a small vehicle, you gain in producibility and just time to market. And, when you're a new brand, time to market is important, as well as leaning on other companies' experience and manufacturing. So while Rivian does in the R1 make their own, basically most of the controllers, all the boards are totally made in-house. A lot of the other components are as off the shelf as possible. Best example of that is the Bosch drive units that are on every wheel, right? Those are maybe somewhat customized for Rivian, but they worked with Bosch with kind of an existing model so they could get things to market and they knew they would be reliable right off the bat. So in the case of Rivian's battery pack and the 2170 cells that they use are standard off-the-shelf Samsung cells, model numbers INC 2170-50G. So you can actually look up the specs of those cells online. You might even be able to buy them yourself if you want to. Now, famously, Rivian likes to talk about the number of cells in the pack. There's 7,776 cells in the full R1 large pack. They're stringed together to total of 135 kilowatt hour. Stay tuned for later because I'm going to talk about that one last cell in the flashlight. But anyway, they put 7776 cells in a string to do that whole pack. And as far as the packs are concerned, they're formed out of bricks. The smallest component, the next size up component from the cells, they're in bricks. 72 cells are in parallel, are 1.25 kilowatt hours to form a brick. So again, that brick will have the same 3 to 4 volts of a cell with 72 in parallel. And you can imagine that amazing current capacity that you can pull with 72 in parallel. And by the way, I've personally read over 1800 amps when you floor it. Those bricks are put in series then, in 12 in series to make a module. So that module again is 72 cells in parallel at 1.25 kilowatt hour, and then 12 in series of those bricks to form a pack module. And a pack module, similar to what you've seen with like Model S modules, are kind of their own sub-assembly. That pack module is 50.4 volts and 15 kilowatt hours. Again, it's kind of similar to Model S, where they had pack modules and people recover those, and you can use a smaller number of those modules at 50 volts each for various projects or other EVs. The R1 pack has 9 modules in it in series. So again, we have 12 bricks in a series for a module and 9 modules in a series for a pack. And that's where you'll get the total pack is 127 series, still has that 72 parallel cell count for a total of 135 kilowatt hours. And the voltage range when fully discharged at 0% is 270 volts. When fully charged is 453 volts. Of the 135, 131 kilowatt hours is usable in this large pack. And so at the time, just 2 years ago, that was one of the largest packs in the market. Tesla's famously gotten away with more in the 60 to, let's say 75 kilowatt hours for a Model 3, 60 for a base, 90 for the larger Model S packs in general. Now, they have a lot new pack designs and so forth. So the nice thing about coming out with a truck is, unlike a car that's compact, you have a lot more space to hide things. And so you can afford to do things off the shelf with external battery chargers, external inverters, and this very large battery pack, and still have a usable vehicle. And I know a lot of brands don't do a good job of that, but Rivian did a very good job of that. So there's still a lot of extras and a lot of optimizations for space, yet we still have a very large trunk. We have a lot of storage. To me, the coolest thing about this pickup truck is just how much storage there is that you don't normally have in a pickup truck. All right, so back to the pack. Physically, those pack modules, again, there's 9 modules in the pack. They're stacked actually on top of each other. So most packs are just one layer vertical, especially in Tesla, or Rivian has 2 of those modules on top of each other. So it makes it a very thick floor. Again, you can do that in a truck, can't do that in a car. So when you pack 2 of those modules on top of each other, you get a much thicker pack, plus the floor the size of the truck. Interestingly, they don't go nearly as far back as they could, and that was, again, part of the original plan, because they were going to come out with an even larger max pack, which is one of the many things that they stopped doing. As for that physical design, again, 9 modules. There's 4 on each side, and then 1 more in the front, times 2 layers. And in the front one's kind of centered, and the left and right of that module is where the BMS boards exist, where they have the contactors and fuses and power distribution. It's not quite as nearly as much hardware as Tesla puts in its penthouses, but the typical pack related things are up in the front of the pack on the 2 sides. To go into detail of how the control of the pack is, it has, of course, a BMS. The modules have their own BMSs, but it has a standard ISO SPI BMS controlling everything, monitoring everything. Interestingly to me, instead of the more common pack pyro fuse that Tesla uses plus a contactor, in the case of the first gen R1, Rivian has 4 contactors. There's 2 contactors in parallel on both the negative and the positive side of the pack. Not sure why they did that initially. Again, it may have just been early on simplification, but the dual parallel contactors on both sides of the pack add that, both the redundancy and the current capacity that you wouldn't normally have with the single contactor that most packs, or Tesla certainly, uses. There is a pyro switch, but it's on the 12-volt side, so you have, the contactors are 12-volt controlled, and they do go through a pyro switch, actually right in front of me in the dashboard here. For some reason, it's actually easy to get to and replace, but it's just on the 12-volt side, and they do fire that to make sure that the contactor is fully open in the event of an accident or, a isolation failure. On the pre-charge side, it's kind of also traditional, with just a relay to a pre-charge resistor. Again, you need to when you're going to close those contactors to enable high voltage output, you need to charge the other side to match the high voltage before you close those contactors. So you'd get a giant spark that would melt the contacts in those contactors and reduce their lifetime or make them fail. So on a high voltage pack, you have a pre-charge circuit, and very traditionally, it's just a relay and a resistor that lets that relatively slowly charge the capacitance in the motors, inverters, and other items. Probably does that quickly in a second, but whereas to compare to, if you look at my old video, Tesla did a kind of a special, more complicated thing where they did this reverse charge from the 12 volt to pre-build a 12 volts. Rivian doesn't do that. They do the simple way that most others do. And then also up front of the battery is then kind of a power distribution that goes through fuses. These are larger fuses, probably about the same size as the cells, but traditional thermal fuses to all the outputs. And your outputs, again, are your drive units, front and back, as well as accessories like your cabin heater, the compressor. Interestingly, there's a spare unused connector on the side of the pack, and it's yet another thing that makes me wonder if Rivian had originally some idea for a high voltage accessory. Would have loved something like that. Thermally, the coolant comes externally, of course, and it's called the thermal management module. It heats and cools the pack as you need. And we use waste heat from the motors, as most modern EVs and Teslas do. So the motors can be run less efficiently or use power sent through them when they're stationary to create heat. And I believe it's 5 kilowatts per motor. So you can use, most EVs do this now. The old way was to have a separate resistive heater. So Rivian uses waste heat from the motors and can then pump that coolant into the pack to warm up the pack. And then it uses the AC compressor. The cabin AC compressor also cools the coolant for the pack. And again, the first generation R1, if you've fast charged it, you've not only heard but felt that thing, because it's mounted just in front of your foot. And it gets, when it runs full tilt, it gets very loud. You can feel it running. So a lot of people think there's a problem, but that's normal as design. The next generation, they did move that away from there, quiet it down. I've also added a whole heat pump, so that's improved. As far as temperatures, the regular operating range is -20 to 50 Celsius. There's no charging or regen below 10 Celsius, so not even 0. Rivian has continuously shown signs that they want to protect this pack. They want to make sure there's absolutely no chance of it catching on fire, but they won't want to see degradation. They're very conservative with a lot of the decisions. You can choose to overcharge things. You can choose to push it. You can choose to thermally not manage it very much, which will reduce the lifetime performance. And Rivian has always shown to be very conservative. So, I do people hear complaints about, cold weather performance or long-standing regen. It's Rivian being extremely careful with its pack. See my previous video on my regen testing going down a hill. But a lot of people have also shown that they've had almost no degradation. We certainly, even years in, have not had a single Rivian battery fire, which, when you're a young company, it's important not to have that negative press. So Rivian has done a great job in protecting this pack and making those decisions to, it's a huge pack, it's a big investment, and it's going to last a while because they've done this. Anyway, no charge or regen below 10 C of pack temperature. Again, not outside temperature. The sweet spot, 25 to 30 C is the target temperatures that it wants. It needs to be in that zone, 25 to 30 C for 500 amp full charging, for example. So when you're navigating to a charger, hopefully it's preconditioning. It's trying to get it in that 25 to 30 C zone. And as soon as it starts charging, it's trying to cool it to keep it there. And, you don't stay there for very long. There's a ton of heat, 500 amps. So as people see that the battery degrade, or the charging current does fall fairly quickly. And that's, one comment people have with the Rivian is it can't hold that 220 kilowatt for very long. because Rivian is somewhat restrictive with the pack temperatures. Now, I've been talking about the large pack in the original R1. They did eventually come out after a year and a half with the Max Pack, but the Max Pack was not what we were expecting. So as I described, the 9 modules in here, there's space behind them underneath the truck for 2 additional modules at least, and we all expected the Max Pack to add those extra 30 kilowatt hours at least. And we're a bit surprised when the Max Pack came out. It only went from 131 to 141 kilowatt hours, only 10 extra kilowatt hours usable. What's even the point? And they did this by just using an updated chemistry of the Samsung, basically a newer model of the same Samsung cell. So kind of a cheat, right? Like it's just a slight battery upgrade without changing anything. I mean, this has been one in a number of things that I think we've seen Rivian intend or plan early on to do something, and in the interest of time, money, and success, they've kind of had to cancel those plans. Where's my winch? So you can't blame them. It is paramount that Rivian stays successful and get as close to profitability as soon as possible. And so it's just one of the decisions I'm sure they had to make, basically low costs, to just change the battery chemistry to a new model and keep everything the same. So the Max Pack in the R1 uses the exact same everything, but they just upgrade the cell itself, and it goes from 131 to 141 kilowatt hour usable capacity. And it's packaged exactly the same. Now, one more thing that's been said many times by Rivian, many employees, I think in their documents and their advertising, is there's 7776 cells in the pack in the truck, but the flashlight has the 7777 cell. Hey, isn't that fun? And they have literally said it has the same exact cell. Well, here's the Rivian flashlight. Has anyone bothered to open it up? If you do, you might find out that, wait a minute, that's a piece of plastic around a much smaller cell. You could even look at the ratings as printed on the side of the cell. This is an 18650. I think they designed this flashlight for a 2170. You could certainly fit one in here with still extra space. And again, I think as a cost-cutting measure, something like that, they decided to downgrade the cell that's in this. I don't know why. It also doesn't have standard contacts. Like there's multiple contacts and a ring of contacts on this. It's they put a lot of money into all this custom design, I think, to save it. You know, and the light's only 1,000 lumens, which is typical of an 18650 flashlight, but a 2170 flashlight, which by the way is a lot smaller despite having a 2170, does 4,000 lumens in general and lasts a lot longer. So it's another cost-cutting thing. I laugh that they sell this for top dollar. One other point with that flashlight is, you know, we're like, oh, there's one more cell in the flashlight. Well, what about the camp speaker? That's got a couple more cells in it. So if you're counting the accessories, you'd be way over 7777. So I don't know why they continue to say that. I also wanted to talk about the changes with the 2025 second generation R1 platform. Rivian's taken their opportunity, actually to my surprise that they've done so soon, just 2 years into production, to fundamentally redesign and update several systems in the truck, just an impressive number of systems, but they've re-engineered the whole pack and made some improvements. One of those is that contactor situation where they were using 4 large big contactors before. They are switching to a standard pyrofuse, high voltage pyrofuse, and single contactor setup. It's just cheaper and is an easy improvement, saves time and cost, or space and cost. Of course, we haven't taken any apart yet, but what they've said so far is there will be 2 packs. This large pack that we have right now, that's 131, is going away, and the large pack is now only going to be 109 kilowatt hours. and the max pack is going to stay same existing at 141. So now there's that differentiation of the max pack being 141 kilowatt hours. The large is only 109. They claim to get away with this because, of course, their new drive motors are more efficient. They've done a number of efficiencies. They have a heat pump. So with just 109, it can almost have the same range as the 131 original R1. And obviously, now you're getting your money's worth maybe for the difference paying up for the max pack. But in the reality, they're just bringing the cost of the truck up. And their cost of production is going way down. So the profitability is going up, which, of course, they need to do as a company. But another little thing is the third battery they're adding is a 92 kilowatt hour LFP pack. The standard pack LFP is supposedly 92 kilowatt hours. And it's not totally new for them because they've been doing LFP in the vans for Amazon and others for a couple of years now. It's still a new design to fit in the truck, but they already have kind of the experience behind it. But the thing I think people don't get is if the LFP pack, which because of its chemistry can be regularly fully charged or at least to 90% every day, whereas these NMC cells, for the best pack of performance, you shouldn't really charge. You should charge, even Rivian recommends in their system, 70%. So even in the Rivian says, they say 70% daily. And so here's an interesting thing. If their large pack is now only 109 kilowatt hours, charging that LFP pack, the standard cheaper pack, to 90% every day would be equivalent to charging that new 109 kilowatt hour large pack to 76%, which is above their daily recommended charge. So you can argue that the LFP pack is much cheaper and for day-to-day use is just as more, if not slightly more usable than the large pack in the new Gen 2 R1. So that's kind of what I know about the Gen 1 Rivian pack, and there's some interesting technical things in there. And if you don't know, I have kind of adapted my CAN server over to Rivian. Originally made that for Tesla. I have manually found a number of signals from the motors and the BMS. So you can see some of these items. I wish I had the thousands I used to have for Tesla, but there are, I don't know, about 100 now that I do know of. And so I do sell the CAN server, and Teslax does have all of those Rivian signals built in. I believe you can download and check out Teslax to go through all those signals. But if you're nerdy like me, I like watching those things live as I drive to better understand, what's going on in my vehicle and why they've made certain decisions, whether in software or performance. Why is my regen going away, as we made previous videos? But that's why I make these tools and put the time into the research to better understand things, because I like to understand them. So you can get those off of my website if you're interested. Please leave comments below for any questions you might have. I'll try to answer them. And hopefully have another video in the future. Thanks.